Ladies and gentlemen, there is a truth more powerful than any weapon, more liberating than any law, and more profitable than any gold mine. That truth is this: he who controls his emotions controls himself. And he who controls himself controls his destiny. Your emotions are not enemies, but neither are they rulers. They are messengers, tools given to you by nature. But when tools begin to command the builder, the structure will surely fall. So it is with your life. Think for a moment, how many times have you seen men of great intellect fall short, not for lack of knowledge, but for lack of composure? How many brilliant opportunities have been lost to anger, fear, envy, or pride? A man may conquer a city, but if he cannot conquer himself, he is no true victor. Let me be clear, emotion is not weakness. Emotion is energy, but uncontrolled, it is like fire in a dry forest. It consumes. Controlled, it is fire in a furnace. It builds, it powers, it transforms. When a man is ruled by emotion, he reacts. When a man governs emotion, he responds. And response, my friends, is the hallmark of mastery. There will be moments in your life when provocation knocks at your door, when you are insulted, betrayed, overlooked, underestimated. The average man retaliates. The wise man reflects. He pauses, not because he is weak, but because he is strong enough to choose his reaction. The most dangerous battles are not fought in the fields. They are fought within. The struggle between thought and feeling, impulse and reason, pride and purpose. If you win that battle, the world outside bends to your will. You want success, then train your emotions. Do not be the servant of anger, but let anger alert you. Do not drown in fear, but let fear instruct you. Do not be ruled by desire, but let desire fuel you. Your emotions are yours. They belong to you. Never allow them to become the chains that bind you. Instead, shape them into wings that lift you. Greatness begins the moment a man says, I will no longer be mastered by my moods. I will rule from within. And when you reach that point, when emotion bows to discipline and impulse yields to intention, then, and only then, will you be the master of yourself, and he who masters himself masters everything. Emotions are tools, not masters. This single truth holds the power to change the entire trajectory of a person's life, yet few ever grasp it fully. From the moment we are born, we are flooded with emotion: joy, fear, anger, sorrow, desire. These are natural, automatic, and deeply human responses to the world around us. But too many people live as if these emotions are forces beyond their control. They surrender to them, obey them, and allow them to steer their lives without question. In doing so, they hand over the reins of their destiny to something unstable and fleeting. Emotions were never meant to be in control. They were meant to be signals, alerts, a kind of internal compass. When fear arises, it is not commanding you to run. It is alerting you to evaluate the risk. When anger swells, it is not ordering you to explode. It is notifying you of an injustice or a violation of values. When sadness falls upon you, it is not a sentence. It is a signal to pause, to reflect, to heal. And when joy fills you, it is not simply for indulgence. It is a confirmation that you are aligned with something meaningful. In each of these cases, emotion presents itself as a messenger, not a master. The tragedy is that most people never learn to interpret these signals. Instead, they react. They allow anger to speak for them. They let fear dictate their choices. They indulge desire without discipline. They wallow in sorrow without seeking its lesson. And in doing so, they become ruled by what was meant to serve. You must understand, the power of emotion is immense, but it is directional energy. It is raw fuel. It must be directed by will, by reason, and by conscious choice. Imagine a carpenter allowing his hammer to swing itself. Ridiculous, isn't it? A hammer is only effective in the hands of someone who knows how to use it. So too are your emotions. They are tools of power, meant to build resilience, insight, and purpose. But if they are given command, they become destructive. Anger builds revolt instead of justice. Fear builds walls instead of wisdom. Desire builds addiction instead of ambition. Joy builds complacency instead of contentment. To live effectively, You must build the habit of emotional awareness, not suppression, not denial, but awareness. You must learn to pause and ask, what is this feeling trying to show me? That pause, that question, is where your strength lies. The moment you can observe an emotion without immediately obeying it, you separate your identity from the feeling. You reclaim authorship over your life. There is a common belief that controlling emotions means becoming cold or robotic. This is false. The person who truly controls their emotions feels more, not less. They are in tune with their internal world, but are no longer victims of it. They can feel deeply and still choose wisely. They can experience hurt and not retaliate with hate. They can face fear and still step forward. That is real strength, not the absence of feeling, but the control of it. Consider any person of greatness, any true leader, innovator, or pioneer. They all share one thing in common: emotional discipline. They are not free of anger or fear or sorrow. They have simply learned to use these emotions as guides rather than chains. They let their passion drive them, but not blind them. They let their fear warn them, but not stop them. They let their joy encourage them, but not distract them from the greater mission. When you allow emotion to be the master, it distorts your perception of reality. You see threats where there are only challenges. You interpret setbacks as failures. You hear criticism as condemnation. But when emotion is a tool in your hand, you begin to see clearly. You understand that fear is a sign to prepare, not to run. That anger is a prompt to address something, not to destroy it. That sadness is a part of healing, not a prison. You gain perspective, and with perspective comes power. The journey of success, fulfillment, and self-mastery begins not with talent or luck, but with internal order. Emotions are part of that internal landscape. Learn to handle them like instruments in an orchestra. Each has a note to play, but none should dominate the performance. The conductor of your mind must be your higher self, your reason, your vision, your will. Reaction is weakness, response is strength. These two modes of behavior may appear similar on the surface. Both are forms of action, but they come from entirely different places within a person. Reaction is impulsive, immediate, and usually emotional. It springs from the lower self, the part of us that seeks to protect pride, ego, and comfort. Response, on the other hand, is measured, intentional, and born from a place of awareness. It is governed by reason and principle, not just emotion. The difference between the two often determines whether a person succeeds or fails, builds or destroys, grows or regresses. When someone insults you, your instinct might be to react. You snap back, say something cutting, or retreat into silence filled with resentment. That is reaction, emotion taking the wheel before the mind has had time to assess the road. But what is truly happening in that moment? You are surrendering your power. You are allowing another person's words, or the sting of a moment, to dictate your behavior. Reaction is the loss of control disguised as strength. It feels powerful in the moment, but leaves you drained, ashamed, or further entangled in unnecessary conflict. Contrast that with response. The insult is heard, yes, but instead of being swept up by it, you observe it. You let it sit. You ask yourself, what is the wisest course of action here? What outcome do I want, and what behavior serves that outcome? Then you act. Maybe you speak with calm authority. Maybe you walk away with dignity. Maybe you address the issue later when the fire has cooled. Whatever the case, you remain in command, not just of your behavior, but of your emotions, your dignity, and your purpose. That is strength. Response does not mean slowness or weakness. It means awareness. It is the act of inserting space between stimulus and action, and within that space lies your ability to choose. That choice is everything. It is what separates the disciplined from the impulsive, the mature from the immature, the effective from the erratic. Animals react. They are driven by instinct. But humans have the gift of self-awareness, the capacity to pause, to reflect, and to govern their behavior according to will rather than reflex. When a man builds his life on reaction, he builds it on shifting sand. His moods sway with the opinions of others. His decisions are driven by fear, pride, or immediate gratification. He is easily manipulated, easily angered, easily discouraged. He is not free, though he may believe he is simply being real or standing up for himself. What he is really doing is giving the world permission to push his buttons and pull his strings. True strength is found not in how loudly a man speaks, but in how deeply he listens before he decides to act. Response requires training. It does not come naturally, especially in a world that glorifies outrage, quick comebacks, and emotional displays. But if you want to rise above the average, you must live above the average level of emotional control. That means developing habits of self-observation. It means recognizing when your buttons are being pushed and resisting the urge to act before you understand what is really going on. It means asking not, "How do I feel?" but "What result do I want?" and "What behavior will bring it about?" There is nothing passive about a response. It is not about backing down or suppressing your feelings. It is about standing in the full awareness of your emotion and choosing what to do with it. That is real courage. That is real power. Anyone can yell when provoked. Anyone can retreat when afraid. But it takes discipline to speak when silence tempts you, or to stay calm when the heat rises. It takes character to hold your fire until it can be used constructively. You can spot the difference in every area of life. In relationships, reactive people escalate conflict, while responsive people build understanding. In business, reactive leaders make rash decisions under pressure, while responsive leaders create sustainable strategies. In times of crisis, those who react worsen the situation, while those who respond become the anchors others can rely on. This is not theory. It is a law of human behavior. You either control your impulses, or your impulses control you. You either choose your behavior, or you let your emotions choose for you. Reaction is the language of the undisciplined. Response is the language of the self-mastered. The strength you seek in life and leadership, in relationships, in personal growth will not come from instinctive outbursts. It will come from the quiet, consistent practice of choosing how you act, rather than letting the moment dictate it. Uncontrolled emotion destroys, directed emotion builds. The difference lies not in the strength of the emotion, but in how it is channeled. Emotion itself is not the enemy. In fact, some of the greatest achievements in human history were driven by deep emotional energy, passion, love, anger at injustice, desire for progress. The problem arises when emotion is left unchecked, allowed to spill over without direction, purpose, or discipline. Like a river breaking its banks, it causes chaos, flooding every area of life with unintended consequences. When emotion runs wild, logic is drowned out. Decisions made in the heat of ungoverned feeling often lead to regret. A harsh word spoken in anger can ruin a relationship that took years to build. An impulsive financial choice made out of greed or fear can unravel stability. A moment of panic can lead to surrendering a goal that only needed patience. This is the destructive side of emotion, when it becomes the master rather than the servant, when it dictates your thoughts, your words, and your actions without your consent. Emotions are powerful forces, but power by itself is neither good nor bad. Fire can burn down a forest or power a city. Electricity can kill or illuminate. Water can destroy a town or nourish a crop. It all depends on control on intention and use. The same applies to human emotion. If directed with purpose, it can be one of the greatest assets a person possesses. If left wild and reactive, it becomes a liability. Take anger, for instance. Uncontrolled, it leads to outbursts, violence, broken trust, and wasted opportunities. It blinds reason and compels action that often harms both the one who feels it and the one it is aimed at. But directed, anger can be the spark that drives change. It can compel a person to stand up against wrong, to break free from mediocrity, to draw boundaries and protect what matters. When tempered with clarity and guided by values, anger becomes strength. Fear is another powerful emotion often misunderstood. When uncontrolled, it paralyzes. It prevents people from speaking up, trying new things, taking calculated risks. It causes hesitation where courage is needed. But when directed, fear becomes awareness. It sharpens focus. It prompts preparation. It teaches humility and warns of danger that should be respected, not avoided. A man who knows how to listen to his fear without obeying it completely becomes wise and strategic. Even love, when uncontrolled, can be destructive. It can turn into obsession, codependence, or emotional blindness. But when guided by principle and understanding, love becomes a constructive force. It motivates sacrifice, inspires creativity, deepens connections, and elevates both giver and receiver. The difference is direction. Left to roam free, emotion distorts. Given shape and aim, it empowers. The task, then, is not to suppress your feelings. Suppression only buries the emotion, where it festers and eventually explodes. The task is to become a steward of emotion, to recognize what you are feeling, understand its source, and decide what to do with it. This requires discipline, reflection, and a strong inner foundation. It is a skill that can be learned, but it demands practice. Emotion is energy, and energy needs form to be useful. The builder does not fear the power of the hammer. He learns how to swing it. The blacksmith does not dread the fire. He bends it to his will. The pilot does not tremble before the wind. He adjusts the wings to ride it. In the same way, you must learn to adjust yourself to your emotional winds. That is how you build, not break. People often associate emotional expression with authenticity, but true authenticity is not rawness. It is alignment. It is when your emotion, your mind, and your actions all work together in pursuit of a higher purpose. That is how leaders inspire. That is how artists create. That is how ordinary people rise above their circumstances and build lives of meaning, not by suppressing how they feel, but by mastering it and turning it into fuel for something greater. Uncontrolled emotion leaves a trail of damage in words, in relationships, in decisions, in missed opportunities. Directed emotion builds character, moves mountains, creates legacies. The challenge is to become the architect of your emotional life, to take what you feel and give it structure, shape, and purpose. That is the difference between a life that is constantly reacting and one that is steadily rising. The greatest battles are fought within, not on battlefields, not in boardrooms, and not across negotiating tables. The real war, the one that determines the course of a life, is the one between a person and their own doubts, fears, impulses, and desires. It is silent, unseen by others, but it is constant. Every day, from the moment you wake up to the moment you lay your head down, you are engaged in decisions that determine whether you are ruled by your higher self or your lower nature. The struggle begins with thought. There are thoughts that uplift, that speak of vision, courage, discipline, and hope. Then there are those that whisper limitation, fear, resentment, and envy. These conflicting voices live inside every human being. The question is, which voice do you listen to? Which do you allow to shape your choices? This is where the battle lies, not in the events of life, but in your interpretation of those events, in the meaning you assign to them, and in the decisions you make in response. A person may seem calm and collected to the outside world, while inside they are wrestling with impatience, anger, or despair. This internal conflict, when left unaddressed, can sabotage even the most promising path. The man who cannot control his thoughts will eventually lose control of his behavior. The woman who does not master her inner dialogue will find that the world becomes a reflection of her own chaos. The fiercest enemy is not always out there. It is often the self, undisciplined, unfocused, and emotionally reactive. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to move forward despite it. That decision does not happen in the outside world first. It happens inside. It is one in the mind. A person who appears confident on stage or bold in business has likely faced hours of inner conflict, wrestling with insecurity, overcoming doubt, resisting the urge to quit. What you see as strength is the result of countless small victories in the hidden battle within. The temptation to quit, to lash out, to justify bad behavior, to blame others, to seek comfort rather than growth. These are all part of the internal war. Every time you choose to take the higher path, you win a battle. Every time you delay gratification, speak with integrity, or act with purpose in the face of emotion, you take ground within yourself. You become a little more in command, a little more centered, a little more powerful, not in the sense of dominating others, but in ruling your own spirit. There are moments when silence is harder than speech, when restraint is more difficult than action, when kindness is a greater challenge than retaliation. These are the moments where the battle intensifies. These are the crossroads where character is forged. Anyone can appear strong when circumstances are easy, but when frustration boils, when anxiety rises, when envy creeps in, when life doesn't go as planned, that's when the real fight begins. True leadership begins with self-leadership. You cannot lead others if you are not first in command of yourself. You cannot ask for excellence from others while making excuses for your own lack of discipline. The man who governs himself stands taller than the one who governs many, but cannot master his own moods, his own ego, or his own appetites. Self-mastery is not about perfection. It is about commitment to the fight. It is about showing up each day determined to choose awareness over autopilot, principle over impulse, and vision over emotion. This internal battle never ends. It evolves. As you grow, the enemy becomes more subtle, more refined. At one level, it may be laziness. At another, it may be pride disguised as confidence. The battlefield shifts, but the war remains, and that is not a reason to despair. It is a reason to stay alert, to build strength from within, not for show, but for stability. Because the more ground you gain within, the less the world outside can shake you. There are victories no one will applaud, no one will witness, and no one will reward. But they are the most important victories of all. Choosing not to react, choosing not to quit, choosing to stand in alignment with your values when compromise would be easier. These wins form the core of who you are becoming. They shape your destiny quietly, consistently, and powerfully. The greatest challenges in life are not what happens to you, but how you handle what happens. That handling is born in the inner war. Discipline over emotion is the path to mastery. Every great achievement, every act of lasting influence, is born not from fleeting inspiration, but from sustained discipline. Emotion may ignite the fire, but discipline keeps it burning through the long, dark hours when motivation fades. Anyone can act when they feel like it. Anyone can start something with enthusiasm, but it is only the disciplined who carry it through when excitement is gone and challenges appear. Emotion is powerful, but it is unpredictable. It fluctuates with circumstances, with mood, with the opinions of others. One day you feel like conquering the world, the next you want to retreat from it. If your actions are tied to how you feel in the moment, you become a slave to inconsistency. You may have big dreams, but you will lack the endurance to realize them. Mastery demands something higher than emotion. It demands the ability to do what must be done regardless of what you feel. Discipline is not glamorous. It is often quiet, unseen, and uncelebrated. It is the act of showing up when no one is watching. It is rising early, staying focused, staying late, refining the small things. It is keeping your word to yourself even when you no longer feel like honoring it. Emotion asks, "Do I feel like it?" Discipline declares, "It doesn't matter." Emotion says, "This is hard, I want to stop." Discipline replies, "It's hard, but I keep going." Those who are ruled by emotion live in a cycle of starting and stopping. They begin with excitement but lack the structure to push through obstacles. They rely on inspiration, which comes and goes, instead of building habits that keep them on course. Without discipline, goals remain fantasies. Dreams remain dreams. Plans remain written words with no action to back them. But when discipline rules, even the most modest effort, repeated over time, produces results. Discipline is the bridge between desire and achievement. Many people desire greatness. Few are willing to pay its price. The price is showing up when tired, saying no to distraction, staying the course when others quit. The world is full of talented people with unrealized potential, not because they lack the gifts, but because they lacked the structure to guide those gifts. Emotion says, "I'll do it later." Discipline says, "I'll do it now." To live a life of excellence, you must train yourself to act beyond the mood of the moment. You must build systems that support your goals, not systems that serve your comfort. Mastery is never accidental. It is deliberate. It is earned through repetition, correction, and consistency. The disciplined mind is not free from emotion. It simply knows how to manage it. It does not deny feeling. It overrides it when necessary for a greater purpose. A disciplined person is not one who never feels lazy, fearful, or doubtful. It is the one who feels those things and chooses to act anyway. Emotion may knock at the door, but it does not get to drive the vehicle. Discipline is the driver. Emotion can be the fuel, but if you let it steer, you will end up off course. This principle applies in every area of life, in health, in relationships, in work, in leadership. The quality of your outcomes is determined by your consistency, not your intensity. Training the body is difficult. Training the mind is harder, but training your emotions, to feel them, understand them, and still act according to your highest values, that is where mastery begins. The man who can master his impulses can master his future. The woman who can delay gratification, who can persist through discomfort, builds a foundation that cannot be shaken by the storms of life. People admire discipline from a distance, but often reject its demands up close. It is uncomfortable, yes, but it is also freeing. The more disciplined you become, the more reliable you become to yourself. You no longer wait for motivation or perfect conditions. You become the kind of person who does what needs to be done, regardless of weather, mood, or opinion. That kind of person creates impact. That kind of person moves forward when others freeze. That kind of person becomes a leader not by title, but by example. Mastery is not a single moment of greatness. It is the result of countless acts of discipline carried out day after day, often in silence, often without praise. It is found in the decision to train rather than rest, to learn rather than coast, to build rather than distract. Emotion fluctuates, discipline remains. It is the foundation upon which all growth stands. Control of emotion begins with awareness. You cannot govern what you do not first recognize. Most people move through life without truly understanding what drives them in any given moment. They feel anger, jealousy, fear, or sadness, and immediately act on those feelings, assuming them to be justified, valid, and even noble. But emotion is not truth. It is a signal, a message, a reaction to perception. If the perception is flawed, the emotion that follows will be flawed too. Therefore, awareness is the first power, the ability to stop and observe what you are feeling before you act on it. This awareness is not a passive state. It is active observation. It is the inner pause between stimulus and response. Something happens, and instead of immediately reacting, you take a moment to look inward. You ask, what am I feeling right now? Where is this emotion coming from? Is it based on fact, or is it based on assumption, insecurity, or old patterns? That moment of reflection can change everything. It can prevent you from saying something you regret, making a poor decision, or escalating a situation that could be handled with wisdom. Awareness is the doorway to self-mastery. Without it, you are at the mercy of every passing feeling, every mood swing, every emotional trigger. But with it, you become the observer of your own mind rather than its slave. You begin to see patterns, how certain people, words, or circumstances consistently provoke certain reactions in you. You begin to understand that much of your emotional turbulence has little to do with the present and everything to do with unresolved experiences, unmet expectations, or distorted beliefs. That realization is not weakness, it is liberation. Many people fear this level of self-awareness because it forces them to take responsibility. It is easier to blame others, to point to external causes for internal storms, but control of emotion cannot be outsourced. No one else can manage your inner world for you. No one else can take command of your thoughts, your breath, your responses. That work is yours and yours alone, and it begins with the willingness to look inward, even when it is uncomfortable. Emotional awareness also includes understanding the physical responses that accompany feeling, the tension in your jaw when you are angry, the tightness in your chest when you are anxious, the shallow breathing when you are overwhelmed. These are signals. The body speaks, and the disciplined individual learns to listen. By paying attention to these signs, you can often intercept emotional spirals before they gain momentum. You can recognize that the reaction building within you is not a mandate, only a suggestion, and you have the power to choose a different course. Self-awareness also invites the practice of reframing. Once you recognize an emotion and its source, you can challenge its accuracy. You can ask, is this feeling helpful? Is it leading me toward my goals or away from them? Is there a different way to see this situation? Reframing is not denial. It is the art of changing the lens through which you view the moment. When you shift perception, emotion often shifts with it. A setback may no longer feel like failure, but like a lesson. A disagreement may no longer feel like an attack, but like an opportunity to understand. This practice requires humility. It demands that you admit you don't always see clearly, that your emotions, while valid, are not always right. But humility is not self-deprecation. It is the strength to admit when correction is needed. It is the foundation of wisdom. Without it, emotion will harden into ego, and ego resists all growth. Over time, with sustained effort, awareness becomes your default. You begin to notice not only your own emotional patterns, but those of others. You become less reactive to provocation, more patient with misunderstanding, more discerning in your choices. People may even describe you as calm, grounded, or centered, not because you feel nothing, but because you feel and still choose wisely. There is power in being able to hold emotion without letting it overflow. There is strength in feeling deeply but acting deliberately. That is not detachment, it is not coldness, it is presence. It is the mark of someone who has done the inner work, who has trained their mind to remain stable in chaos, who has learned that emotion is a tool, not a master. Control of emotion does not mean suppression. It means alignment. It means bringing your feelings under the leadership of your purpose. It means knowing what you want to build, who you want to become, and refusing to let momentary feelings derail that vision. That journey begins not with action, but with awareness, with the quiet, courageous decision to observe, understand, and take ownership of your inner world.